All right, welcome. Today we're going to look at basic grammar. We're going to start off with this with run-on sentences and incompletes and how to avoid those. So we'll skip some things we don't need to cover here. It does look at syntax versus grammar. That is kind of interesting to note that grammar is the rules, syntax is more like the style or the arrangement in a sentence. I like Aristotle's definition of a sentence. He calls a sentence a form of speech which has a beginning and an end within itself, and is of such a length as to be easily comprehended at once. That's extremely important to keep in mind, that, keeping in mind these rules that you're going to learn here, comprehension is key, right? Writing a simple and clear sentence, it will always be superior than to writing a convoluted, complex sentence that is unnecessarily complex. Simplicity is key. This goes over some of the key abbreviations in the lecture. I don't really feel I need to cover this right now. That's just a glossary, basically. Okay, the theory is pancake theory. If you can follow this and understand this, you shouldn't have issues with run-on sentences in the future. Building sentences and avoiding run-ons are like stacking pancakes. Just make sure you've got something between the layers of pancakes. What we do is we think of each pancake here as an independent clause, and that is something that has a subject, a verb, and an object. And what goes in between are conjunctions, and they're all different types of conjunctions: coordinate, subordinate, correlative. But as long as you've got something between the pancakes, between those subject, verb, object sets, you'll be all right. You'll be fine. You'll avoid those run-on sentences. So here goes over simple sentences. A simple sentence has three parts: one subject, one verb, one object. Like in this first one here, Tom reads novels, or let's see, look at these examples here. John studies English. As we see here, the subject is the person doing the action, the verb is the action, object receives that action. There's not always an object, but a good way to think of it is like, Manuela threw the ball, right? Manuela the subject, threw the verb. There doesn't always need to be an object, but in that case there is, right? There's something receiving the action. There's a ball being thrown. There are some examples of independent clauses. Remember, independent clauses just have those three parts: subject, verb, object. If it has one subject, one verb, one object, that is a basic sentence, or what we also call an independent clause. And the next type of sentence is what they call a compound. Compound has two parts, typically has a comma and an coordinate conjunction to separate those two parts. And like I said, it has two parts. Like in this lower example here, there is one thing that happens in the first clause, there's a comma, there's an and or a conjunction, and then there's something that happens in the other clause, right? There's an SVO on either side of this comma and the and. There's a subject, verb, object on both sides. That makes it a compound sentence. So here we are, continuing with compound sentences. Okay, so coordinate conjunctions, the first type of conjunction, the most basic kind. You've most likely learned this before. It is known by the acronym FANBOYS, FANBOYS, standing for what you see here: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So remember that. That's an easy acronym. Those are all the coordinate conjunctions in the English language. Coordinate conjunctions are useful for building, let's see, two types of sentences. Yeah, you have your compound and your compound complex. That's really the only purpose of these conjunctions. So like an example here, a dream, all a dream that ends in nothing and leaves the sleeper where he lay down, but I wish. you to know that you inspired it. So that but there is our coordinate conjunction being used with a comma, and also we have a subject verb object on either side, so we know it's a compound sentence. Another example here, although you don't typically see it with multiple conjunctions, and the semicolon, that's the second example here is kind of a more traditional use of it. I was persuaded that I'd gotten into a world of bad spirits and that they were going to kill me, from Olaudah Equiano's The Interesting Life of Olaudah Equiano. And it brings up an interesting question, of course. Do we start sentences with and? I mean, look at this. This is John Steinbeck's East of Eden, right? One of the classic books, classic American literature books of all time. And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. But do we start sentences that way? If we look in the textbooks that I used to use, they were not very clear about answering it, which I didn't like, so I kept looking around. Different universities said no. Different colleges said no. Pasadena, up the street, says no. Of course you don't start a sentence with a coordinate conjunction. But then the Oxford Dictionary says that you do, which got me confused. So I kept looking, and I found that there is some disagreement on this. Probably the best advice was this here, from Illinois Valley Community College. The short answer is no. If you want a short answer, that's it. However, you know, if you have someone like me who knows enough about grammar to know that these rules exist, such sentences can be used effectively, as it says here below. Because sentences starting out with these words stand out, they can be used for emphasis. So anyway, I wouldn't use this in another class. I would, of course, ask your professor, you know, do you mind if we start sentences with coordinate conjunctions? Not every teacher agrees that that is okay. I don't even want it very much, but if you want to sparingly use it only for emphasis, you know, only a couple times in a paper, that would be okay. And that's the answer, right? Basically to that question, though. So no, in general. But for creative writing, journalism, of course. And here's a really good example. This is from the classic economic text of the last 20 years, The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman. And this is why I argue in this book that around the year 2000, we entered a whole new era, globalization 3.0. And I look at this sentence in particular because this is the thesis of his book. That's it. Like, this is the very beginning of the book. As you can see, this is page 10. And what he's doing there is he's setting up everything that's to come. Great book, by the way. A complex sentence is one that will either begin with a subordinate conjunction, like if, when, or because, or that word will come in the middle of the sentence. But either way, a complex sentence basically has two parts. You have one independent clause, one dependent clause. The dependent clause, as you can see here, is the one that will begin with a subordinate conjunction, like when, if, because, since, although, even though, whenever, wherever. I've got more or less a list of these here, of the subordinate conjunctions. There's a list of some of the more common ones. And basically these help you create a clause, not a sentence. And if you look back at this page, it clarifies that, right? A dependent clause is not a sentence. Because you've got this subordinate conjunction here, if you were to leave it there by itself, it's actually a fragment. But it's a part of a larger sentence. Don't necessarily need to think of it as a fragment, but if you do see it in your writing, it is helpful to note that that's not a sentence. But yeah, think of it as a building block. It's a building block, right? A good way to remember your common subordinate conjunctions is aubis. I'm sorry, there's not a clearer, better conjunction or acronym. Sorry. Aubis stands for after, although, as, when, while, until, before, because, if, and the word since, not the word and there. Aubis. And then the last major type of sentence is the compound complex. And it is just how it sounds. What we do with the compound complex, I like to think of it as basically it's a compound sentence, right? The beginning of this word is compound, so that's actually helpful. Look at the end of this example, the first example, right? Jack reads comics, but Sam reads only magazines. That's a compound sentence. That's all that is. That's one SVO, we have a comma, coordinate conjunction, another SVO, that's a compound sentence. So all we're doing really when we create this type of sentence, the compound complex, is you just add a dependent clause to an already formed compound sentence. So it's really that easy. All right, so we're into the last segment here, with only a couple minutes left, which is perfect. So this gives you some examples of compound complex sentences. In this example here, there is, let's see, looks like the dependent the dependent clause is up here. Is up here with after having slept the sleep of just of the just, and then we have we have different parts of it, right? But half of the independent clause is here, the other half is down here. Okay, and then conjunctive adverbs. These are to build more complex sentences. So say you've already got a complete sentence and you want to add a further piece of clarification. That's when conjunctive adverbs come in. These are most of the familiar ones, right? Therefore, thus, moreover, hence, however. These can be used in three ways. You can use it to start a sentence with just simply a comma. Here, let me move myself over here. So it can start with a comma, simply ending with a, start with your conjunctive adverb, comma. That's your introductory clause. You could use it as a pause, as you see here in the second example, where you would surround it with commas and just use it as like a beat or a pause in a sentence. And the last one there is the most common. Well, I'd say 1 and 3 are the most common. In this case, this is pretty much a standard formation of this sentence. You have a complete sentence, no matter how long it is. In this case, I think I built a complex sentence first. Then you have, after your complete sentence, you have a semicolon, conjunctive adverb, comma. At that point, you add one more complete sentence or complete thought. It could be of any length that you want, and that's it. That's the basic rule. You understand that it works like a semicolon. There's a complete sentence on each side, and you just put these three little things in the middle as a transition. Semicolon, conjunctive adverb, comma. That's it. Those are your conjunctive adverbs. And we have some examples here. This is from, this is Homi Baba. However, right, the signs that construct such histories and identities, gender, race, homophobia, post-war diaspora, refugees. So he's opening it with that, with the conjunctive adverb there. This is from Nabokov's Lolita. She was, however, not easy to deal with. Well, neither was he. And then we have this example here. This is from the Henry Louis Gates, Dr. Gates's book. We have the semicolon, conjunctive adverb, comma used there to bring those together. Good. And here we are at the sentence types. Oh, let's get to the end here. You can review these on your own. Complete sentences have an SVO, one subject, one verb, one object. Incompletes typically lack a subject, verb, or object. That's what makes it an incomplete sentence. And then we'll finish with back to pancake theory. A stack of dry pancakes, or independent clauses, will create a run-on. Always use conjunctions. Always use syrup between the pancakes. That's it for Grammar 101. Thank you.